Welcome to Citizen Sports, covering all of Ouachita Parish athletics. Now here's your host, Matt Reynolds and Jake Martin.
Welcome back, Citizen Sports, brought to you each week by Simmons Sporting Goods and Bastrop, where they are having the No Tax Weekend Sale coming up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, September 1, 2, and 3. Pay no tax online and also no tax in the store, but I suggest you make it over the store if you can. 70,000 square feet of shopping space. They got your cameras, your ammo, your guns, your camping gear, your decoys, dog supplies, hunting accessories, anything you want. Stands, blinds, optics, it's all there. Matt Reynolds and Jake Martin here to bring you your football fix this week as we are underway. Week 1 start after the jamborees out of the way. But first of all, welcome in my partner, Jake. How you doing?
Doing all right, brother. Can't complain about anything right now.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about. Honestly, Jake, the older I get, it's harder to talk about sports when you look and see what's going on in Houston and what's going on in Lake Charles and Lafayette, and you know people in those areas. But it seems like it's a yearly occurrence right around this time of the year. Some part of the Gulf seems to be getting something like this right around the beginning of football season.
Yep, and that's why I think I'm going to have flood insurance for the rest of my life. We got it this year, and I just told Taylor, I said it's just to ease my mind. Like I understand we're not even in a flood zone, but it's just you see all this stuff. And this hits close to home because we saw everything that happened here in Monroe last year, as well as what happened in Baton Rouge. I mean, my wife Taylor, her family, her aunt and uncle, they lived in Baton Rouge, and their house was completely destroyed, and they had they've been living in a FEMA trailer so for the last year. So it's just when you see it that close, you see it on the news, it's one thing, but when you know people who have gone through it, I mean, it's just absolutely devastating. So
yeah, you mentioned those floods last year in Monroe, and a part of that same storm flooded a lot of my area, and I looked all around me, and there was these huge fields of what would be corn and soybeans, lakes, and luckily not a lot of homes got destroyed down here, unlike in Monroe in that area, which got hit really hard as far as residential areas. But just because they tell you, oh, you're not in a flood zone, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get flood insurance.
That doesn't mean anything to me.
I certainly learned that. Well, Jake, unfortunately, we have some tough news to talk about and go ahead and get out of the way because it's been talked about quite a bunch. Obviously, you updated online right after the game, the Bayou Jamb, and you've talked about it on the radio so it's kind of old hat by now, but let's get it out of the way. West Monroe is the latest victim of the LHSAA assault on the rule book, which they have hit a ton of teams lately. And go ahead and tell us what's going on with Coach Arledge and West Monroe High School in their current situation.
Yeah, basically give a quick rundown here because I think a lot of people have followed this story pretty closely. But for those who haven't, basically West Monroe self-reported itself last Thursday, saying that it might have crossed the line on some LHSAA rules. Basically, we found out to be player tampering, which the LHSAA then ruled on the very next day on Friday. They suspended Jerry Arledge for 4 days. They fined the school $5,000, and they put the school on probation. And the player in question, Isaiah George, he's been ruled ineligible, and that was the only thing that West Monroe fought or is trying to fight in an appeal, which they'll meet around mid-September. But they'll try to get George's eligibility back. And Shelby Ainsworth told me, said, that's the one thing we really want. Even if he can't play here, we want him to be able to play somewhere this season. And then earlier this week, Jerry Arledge called me, said, we'll talk about this soon, but for right now, I'm just going to give you a statement. Mm-hmm. And so he sent that over, and nothing earth-shattering in there. Just basically apologized about everything. And it's a weird story because Isaiah George played on West Monroe last year,
right? Yeah,
and then decided to move over to Bastrop, and then came back at the beginning of summer, or at the end of summer, I should say. And so it's very strange, but that's just kind of what happened. And of course, this is taking place while they're still awaiting the decision with Dalvin Hutchinson and LHSAA as well. So it's a bit convoluted, but that's the fine points, I think.
Of course, Dalvin Hutchinson, you're talking about the transfer from Wasp. Now, is he on the field right now?
No, he is not playing.
They're awaiting to hear from the LHSAA.
Yeah,
if he's eligible
they're not
to.
gonna. Yeah, you can't play him because he's ruled. I believe he's ruled ineligible right now. But even if he isn't, if he comes back to be ruled ineligible, you don't want to have to forfeit games. So he is not playing.
Okay, so this comes after what is considered by some to be the death penalty with Southern Lab. And then a couple days later, you have Byrd and a couple other schools got penalties, postseason bans. And then you have this. What do you think? What do you hear, and what do you think's going on with the LHSAA right now? Just all of a sudden starting to maybe be a little bit stricter or enforce rules?
No nonsense. And you saw with Higgins and my mind's leaving me right now, but Higgins was just in a melee in the jamboree with another team. And they have to forfeit their opening games, and so they're just not putting up with anything anymore. I don't know why the sudden change, because we've seen the LHSAA drag its feet on things like this, but man, they're not playing around anymore. So if you're gonna toe the line, I mean you better toe the line, because if you step over that line, they're gonna catch you and they're gonna make it count.
Well, let's get on to football. We saw a good bit of it this weekend. You were over at the Bayou Jamb, and I thought you get a great way of kind of comparing the main event as far as Neville and West Monroe to the Conor McGregor-Floyd Mayweather fight. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, it just felt like on one side you had an experienced competitor that was used to the spotlight, right? And, of course, that was Floyd Mayweather in the boxing ring on that stage. Conor McGregor has been in a lot of main events in the UFC, but he's never been on a stage like this, okay? And so that was West Monroe Saturday night. They had a lot of returning starters. They had a lot of great players that have started since they were freshmen, to be quite honest. And so they were used to it. You saw Slade Bolden running up and down the field. I mean, he looked like he had been doing it his whole life, and quite frankly, it kind of feels like it. It feels like he's been there for that long. But on the other side, you had a Neville team that is a champion in its own right, and that's what you had in Conor McGregor. But it was I compared it to a different realm, because this is a completely new team. They lost 12 to 15 of their best players, and so even though the Neville brand is known as a champion, as a fierce competitor, it wasn't quite ready for this stage, not yet. And so that was kind of the comparison there with Conor McGregor. He wasn't ready to step in there with Floyd Mayweather just yet, with the limited boxing experience he had. And so in that story, I also said, Neville is going to take its lumps early, and we can get into the Rustin game in a little bit, because I'm catching a little flack. I said Rustin should be favored in that game, and
I heard they were kind of giving you a hard time about that on the morning drive. And then, of course, they bring on Rustin Coach, and of course, he's not going to say that.
Yeah, he's not going to say that. Yeah, he if anything, he wants me to say Neville's favored. But
right.
And we can get into that. But what I said in that story is they're going to take their lumps early. But by the time October comes around, Mickey and his staff, they are good enough to get this team back on track. And I think they're going to be a competitor and a contender when district rolls around. And I think that's when they're going to start to make their move. And then, I look for them to have success in the postseason. But you can't just expect – I don't care if it's Neville. I don't care if it's West Monroe. I don't care if it's John Curtis. John Curtis might be a different story. But whoever you are, if you lose 12 to 15 of your best players, you can't expect them to go out there against – great teams. That's what people aren't thinking about. They're disrespected Neville's opponents. I feel that Neville's playing a lot of great teams early. You can't go out there against great teams and just expect that Neville will just come out there with the victory. You got to look at the rosters. You got to look at the players that are returning with experience and say, okay, they're going to make some mistakes, because guess what? They're supposed to. They're going to make those mistakes early, and by the time October comes around, they're going to be used to it. They're gonna hopefully they don't lose their confidence, and then by that time they'll be a contender.
And let's be quite honest, their dress rehearsal was against one of the best teams in the state in any classification the other night.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's something that you have to factor in. You're never going to be perfect in your first game, in your first exhibition, and it's certainly not going to be perfect against a team as talented as West Monroe. So, yeah, you expect the Neville Tigers to be right where you expect them to be towards the end of the year. Let's talk about Ouachita. Ruston, you mentioned Ruston, and they certainly were a team we knew had a lot coming back, right? But I think they shocked some people just how aggressive and physical and really athletic they are this year. It's Ruston they've been down for a few years compared to some of the Monroe schools, but they really looked good the other night against Ouachita. Ouachita, I think you would say, probably didn't give their best performance as Coach Fitzgerald would have wanted, and didn't show what they're really capable of. But certainly that was a hard-hitting physical contest you got to see.
Yeah, all the adjectives you used are correct. I mean, Ruston is an impressive football team. And so is Ouachita. Ouachita's got a lot of talent. Ouachita's issue right now is getting Jabari Johnson, transforming him into a quarterback. Look, he's a great athlete. Nobody's disputing that. But he's got to be able to settle down and make some of the throws that he missed on Saturday. And on the opposite side, Ruston, I like them a lot. I think, they returned a lot. DeAndre Marcus, they moved him to running back. He was a linebacker. And from what I'm hearing is, college is about to come after him because he's about to blow up on the scene. And we saw, he nearly took it 90 yards, had to get called back on a clip on, I believe it was the first offensive play for Ruston in that jamboree. But anyway, I like both sides a lot. I came away impressed with both sides. I think both of the defenses showed a lot. I think Ouachita showed a lot in the fact that it wasn't able to complete a pass, but it was able to still move the football with that rushing attack. Because let's not forget, you still got Dylan Roberts back there who nearly rushed for 1,500 yards, and Jabari Johnson's legs. I'm not going to say it's on the same level as Davion Warren because that would be disrespectful to Davion. Davion was one of the best athletes we'd seen in a while, but Jabari is worthy of being his successor. I just think he's going to have a great year. Especially running the ball. If he can throw it, then, watch out.
Well, the game that started off the Bayou Gym over there, it took me off guard when I was keeping up with you on Twitter. Sterlington, we knew they lost a lot from last year, but we knew they were bringing some guys back, certainly. But I didn't expect them to just put it on St. Frederick like that, step on the throat early and take care of the Warriors really quick.
It just took one miscue. I mean, It was an interception. Tanner Coley made an athletic play, and that made the average starting field position for Sterlington in the first half the St. Frederick's 25-yard line. Okay, so when that happened, it was just no coming back. Sterlington looked like a well-oiled machine. C.J. Colvin was worthy of the hype. Carson Clowers looked like he'd been operating that offense for years. They looked like the real deal. And it's the coaching, too. I mean, they're always in perfect position to make a play. And, I think a lot of Sterlington. And you're right, it was a mismatch. St. Frederick, don't panic. St. Frederick fans, do not panic. I think they're going to be just fine, but you're just outmatched against Sterlington.
Well, it looked like a pretty evenly matched game in the second game. That was Ouachita Christian and Mangum. But I know you talked with Coach Fitzhugh after the game, and he certainly was not happy with the way his team performed in that 0-0 tie.
Yeah, that might have been the most upset I've seen Coach Fitzhugh. I mean, he was still composed and everything, but I could just tell he was very aggravated. And I think it was just because they did not perform. They got inside the 5 twice and could not score. And give a lot of credit to Mangum. Mangum's defense was impressive. Brandon Haynes is going to be a player for that defense. He made all kinds of stops. But they had 8 sacks. And while that's great on Mangum's part, that's awful on OCS's. They got to figure out that offensive line. They got to figure out those issues. And, Stephen Fitzhugh was able to last year. He was able to make some moves and plug some guys in, and we're able to overcome that. Now he's got to do the same thing again. And so that's going to make his job much tougher this year. I mean, can he pull it off 2 years in a row? I think Fitzhugh's good enough coach to do that, but you can't just, you can't just go into it and think, well, they'll figure it out. They'll be fine just because they're OCS. No, these are real problems, and it's going to take some real adjustments, and we'll see if OCS is able to do so.
Well, I know people that listen to this podcast know that we've certainly been, very excited to see the Matt Middleton West Ouachita offense. Don't give up on them yet, but certainly Union put a pin in that last Saturday over at Eddie Robson Classic over at Grambling State University. But having said that, it's kind of like what we said about Neville. give up on them because they look at who they played against, and it's the first game of the year or whatnot. And Union is going to be, I would say, leaps and bounds better than what you saw last year. So West Washita got a really good test over there in Jamboree and had a couple, I believe, a turnover early really hurt them, and then just kind of snowballed from there, Jake.
Yeah, no doubt. And I talked with Matt Middleton about it, and I think this is going to actually help them because now they can just go out there and play ball. Going into this Jamboree, all eyes were, what's this offense going to look like? How's this team going to gel together? It's Matt Middleton's first time really as the head coach. I know it wasn't a game, but it was simulated like a game. So all of those things could they factored into a performance that you saw a lot of nerves. Nerves took over. And I think now, moving forward, you don't have to worry about that. You can just go out there and play ball. And so I think that this will actually help them. Now, they're still going to have their hands full against Sterlington. Don't get me wrong. But I think West Washita's future is still bright, even if they take their lumps this season.
And let's move on. Carroll and Wassman had their own kind of jamboree. I don't remember them doing this in the past. They might have, but I believe it was held over at Carroll. Certainly, I would think you would say defense kind of shined in this game.
Yeah, defense definitely shined. Derek Logwood had a 30-yard interception return for Carroll, and Raylan Coleman had an interception return for a touchdown as well. So I thought that was interesting because all the news has been about them losing Dalvin Hutchinson, and all of a sudden, Raylan Coleman, the other defensive tackle, makes the big play and makes the game-changing play. And so, defense is going to own that district. We know that. And I can't, word that I'm hearing is that Union Parish, and Matt Middleton told me this, he said Union Parish has so many great athletes. And so I can't wait to see who comes out on top in that district. It's gonna be a war every single week, and I can't wait for it.
Well, speaking of a war, this is week 1 of the Pigskin Pick'em, brought to you by Simmons Sporting Goods. Me, Jake, his father, Joey, of course, works for the Concordia Sentinel, and Sam Hanna Jr., the publisher of all 3 papers, Franklin Sun, Washita Citizen, and Concordia Sentinel, all participating in a 15-week war. That's right, week 1, 9 prep games and a college pick each week. And let's just get to it, Jake. We got Arcadia and Washita Christian, one of those intriguing matchups to start out the season in 1A football. A team in Arcadia, I believe, made it to the quarterfinals last year, and Washita Christian coming back down from 2A back to its familiar home in Class A.
Yeah, I think we both took OCS in that one. Mm-hmm. I'm taking OCS. I think they'll get their problems figured out. I think Fitchie's that good of a coach, and they'll win that game.
Well, interesting. Arcadia is bringing back a guy that rushed for 2,900 yards last year. This is a run-heavy offense, and they're losing a guy that rushed for 1,500. So they only threw about 5 or 6 passes all year. Still, I think, OCS is going to, certainly after what happened, against Mangum, the 0-0 tie, Coach Fitchie's going to have them ripping Roy and ready to go. OCS across the board there. St. Frederick and Darbon Woods.
Yeah, give me St. Frederick. I think Darbon Woods still has his issues. I think St. Frederick, I'm still high on them as far as, having Tyler Harris at quarterback. He even made a few plays against Sterlington's defense. I think he has a few more open holes this week. I like St. Frederick in that one.
Yeah, I like them too. St. Frederick across the board. The Fighting Feasters, I guess you would say, go start the season 0-1 according to this panel. Washita at Richwood. Boy, this one's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I was tempted. I almost took Richwood because, I think that much of them. But I think Washita's numbers, I think Washita will pull away in the second half. It'll be tight, but I think Washita will pull away, win by 1 or 2 touchdowns at the very end.
Yeah, I can remember in years past, there's been a lot of 45-0, 45-10. But last year, Washita, Richwood hung with Washita a while before they pulled away. It's still going to be hard for me to pick against, a 5A school like Washita until Richwood. We've seen them, and we haven't seen much of them on the field yet this year. It's going to be close, but I think Washita wins too. Sam Hanna going with Richwood to pull off the upset. And Joey, myself, and Jake go with Washita. Franklin Parish and Rayville, I'll go ahead and start here. I've had a good chance to watch Franklin Parish. I think they're very well coached. They don't make a whole lot of penalties, but they are lacking in depth. They got a couple great players and a whole lot of average players. Rayville's got several great players. I think they're still learning. They're going to lose to Rayville Friday night.
Yep, and you're my source on both of those teams, so how could I disagree with you? I'll take Rabel too.
Sammy and Joey going Franklin Parish. Faraday and Ash, this ought to be a good one down there in Alexandria.
I think it will be, and you look at what Faraday brings back to the table. I think a lot of people look at Ash, look at the numbers. That could be a factor toward the end of this game. That's why I think it's important for Faraday to jump out on Ash. Game got moved to Saturday. It's going to be Saturday now at Tioga. So I don't know what that does to this matchup, but I still like Faraday. I'm going to take Faraday. I think they jump out on Ash and pull off the victory.
I think so, too. I think they're going to get challenged. I think they might even have to come from behind in this game, but I think after watching Faraday, getting a good eye test on them over at the Eddie Robb on Saturday, I'm not picking against that team. Not at this point, at least. I like Faraday. Joey goes with Ash. Sammy says Faraday. Ruston at Neville. Here we go. This one here, I don't know if you could call it a rival. Neville's kind of owned it in recent years. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I'm going with Ruston. And
what?
It's funny because Neville's won its last 50 home games. Jeez. Neville hasn't lost a home game since 2010, but it's the first game of the season. I don't think Neville makes it's a splash immediately. I think it takes them some time, like I mentioned earlier. Ruston has the experience. Ruston has the athletes to compete with Neville. Give me Ruston in the upset.
Wow. Watch out, Jake Barton trying to break the bank in Vegas, go with upset in Ruston. I do like that pick. It was a coin flip for me. The Bill Ruppel thing and 50 wins, that's the only reason I went with Neville. I do think it's a toss-up, though. Joey and Sammy both going with Neville. Here's a good one. Sterlington over at Red Sims Stadium, the reservation. The Panthers and West Washita getting things kicked off.
Sterlington's just too good right now. They're just really too good. They're well coached, and I just think they have the athletes right now. I think West Washita is still trying to find its way. I like Sterlington in this game.
Me too, and I think I'm basing that a little bit on the performances we saw last week. I expected a little more out of West Washita. I expected a little less out of Sterlington. Sterlington looked like gangbusters. I think they'll get the win. Joey says Sterlington. Sammy goes with West Washita. Wassman at Benton. Now, a lot of people may not know a lot about Benton, but being covering a team as much as I do in Franklin Parish, I know about a lot of 4A teams, and this is a great 4A squad that Wassman is going to have to play. I think Benton gets the best out of them in the season opener.
Great 4A team, and I think that's why I agree with you. I think Benton, Dean Smith loaded his schedule early. He's got Benton and he's got West Monroe on the schedule in the first 3 weeks, and so he did that on purpose. He wanted to see how his team would fare against those tough teams. I think they compete, but I like Benton in it.
Yeah, good luck, Dino, with that schedule. But I think Wassman's going to get it figured out. But Benton, I think they get the win this week. And Joey and Sammy, we both going with Wassman. John Arrett and West Monroe, the couple of heavyweights here going after it.
Heavyweights, two of the top 10 teams in the LSWA sports polls in 5A. I like John Arrett a lot. I think they have a lot of talent, but West Monroe is at the top of the mountain right now. I think they're going to be the team to beat in 5A. I like West Monroe at home with the debut of that stadium.
Without a doubt. West Monroe across the board. So, Jake, that gets us to our college pick of the week, and, of course, it's going to be BYU and LSU. Initially to be played over in Houston, of course, that's not going to happen. It ends up being New Orleans, which I thought was kind of an odd pick considering that, they're going to get a lot of rain too, and it could make things very difficult. But the line has changed a little bit. LSU a favorite by 16 points this morning. First of all, does that surprise you at all that LSU is that big of a favorite, or should they be more?
I think that's about right. That's kind of in the ballpark. But and I want to encourage everybody listen to Like Father Like Son, because I want to go deep into this game, because I got a little hate today on the radio. I said that BYU's defense holds a slight advantage over LSU's offense, and everybody was up in arms saying, "What are you talking about?" So that told me right there that people didn't pay attention to BYU last year, and I'd like to get into that a little bit deeper in Like Father Like Son. But I like LSU in this game. I think they win it 24-3, a score like that. I think LSU's defense would simply be too much for BYU, but BYU's defense will keep them in the game at least early.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jake. Don't expect LSU's offense to put up 500 yards you're going to be disappointed if you come in there with those expectations. But expect Dave Aranda's defense full of studs to be flying everywhere and just completely put the clamps down. I think you're right. LSU gets a good 21-point win, something like that. LSU across the board. Want to remind everybody, go to WashitaCitizen.com. We have photo galleries from all the Bayou Jamb games and including some other area jamborees from Keith Foster and Tom Morris. Timo, our great photographers, and also all of our work there as well. Find Jake at Jake Martin OC. I'm at by Matt Reynolds. And each week you can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, and Podbean. And also, like Jake mentioned, go to Like Father, Like Son podcast. That's always a barrel of laughs, too. Jake, until next week.
Happy football.
Shooting like a soldier, like a from Magnolia.